I'm probably the person standing in between all of you and happy hour and dinner and stuff, so I promise to do my best to keep this interesting, and we'll all roll out and get some food and some drinks soon. So thank you for coming to listen. My name is Rettig. I do core research and development on a project called Space Mesh. That's the t-shirt as my day job, but I'm actually not here to talk about layer 1 blockchain protocol R&D. I'm actually here to talk about geopolitics today, and in particular, some interesting stuff that's happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem and in Latin America. I'm sure many of you, like I have been around the venue today listening to some very exciting talks on DeFi and staking and derivatives and fancy protocols and things like that. I think all of these developments and technologies, communities, ecosystems are very exciting and very important. But to me, and it also kind of makes sense that innovation starts at the top, so to speak, right? It starts with these complex products and services for sophisticated users like we are in relative terms. But the reason I'm the most excited about the innovations happening in DeFi is because I have a hope that they will enable financial products and services for everyday people all over the world. And so that's kind of the theme of this talk. How do we get from where we are to there? So I'm going to start with a little bit of a story. So this is me in 2017 at DevCon 3. Believe it or not, we've come a long way. That's not me, that's me. And I was very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and very naive at the time. And I have a background in traditional finance. I used to work at a hedge fund. And after doing that for a few years, I began to feel quite frustrated that, again, the financial innovation that I was participating in, the products and services that we were developing, were not ultimately products and services for everyday people, everyday consumers around the world. And so when I discovered the blockchain and Ethereum ecosystem, this is the aspect of it that excited me the most, right? That we have this powerful set of tools, these money Legos, these primitives that we can use to build products and services for everyday people. I'm not joking when I say that I was excited about doing this, so I'm going to go ahead and dox myself here and admit that my first ICO was this one. It was called EverX, and it was in 2017. Any of you who were around at the time will remember that there were ICOs launching every day in 2017. And this platform, this ICO, was designed to do remittances, right? So this is payments, cross-border payments, and offer services like microfinance and microinsurance to everyday consumers. I haven't followed this project very closely. Apparently it does still exist. I was hoping to come up here and tell you guys it was a scam and I got scammed and this and that. That'd be funnier. It does still exist. I think the project has pivoted a little bit, so that's cool. But this is the first thing that I kind of ever invested in this ecosystem. So fast forward a few years. This is me about a month ago at the Bitcoin 2021 conference in Miami. One big difference you'll notice is no one's wearing a mask. That's actually why I took this selfie, because people didn't believe me when I said that. So that's Miami for you. Yeah, it was a pretty exciting event. So Jack Dorsey was on stage, and there were some hecklers and some just a lot of fireworks and exciting stuff that happened. Floyd Mayweather was on stage as well, for folks who recognize him. Fun fact, he showed up in an Ethereum t-shirt to this conference, and they would not let him on stage wearing an Ethereum t-shirt at a Bitcoin conference. So they forced him to borrow a t-shirt from someone else and change his shirt just before going on stage. I thought that was kind of funny. And then this happened, right? So very Miami, right? We have our palm trees and stuff. I know you can't see this image very well. I'll show you a better image in a moment, but this gentleman named Jack Mallers took the stage, and I think what it says here is El Salvador has become the first country to make Bitcoin legal tender. And so this kind of caught my attention. I was actually outside, I think, like having a drink with a friend or something. Of course, they were projecting the stage outside. And I was like, who is this guy? What is this? Of course, because I had been so interested in remittances and in these kind of developing world use cases, it just immediately caught my attention. So Jack Mallers is the CEO of this project called Strike. I never heard of him. I never heard of Strike. I barely knew where El Salvador was at the time. And so this is a better image. of him and his presentation, One Small Step for Bitcoin, One Giant Leap for Mankind. He announced that he has been spending time in El Salvador recently as part of a particular project there called Bitcoin Beach, which I'll describe in a moment, onboarding locals to use his app, Strike, and to use Bitcoin and Lightning Network, which is the underlying infrastructure. And as if that wasn't kind of exciting or impactful enough, the next thing that happens is a video of this guy pops up. Does anybody know who he is? Someone shout out his name. Anybody? Nayib Bukele, right. So this guy is the president of El Salvador. That's pretty crazy, right? And this video is not a generic video. This is a video address, 6.5 minutes long. This is on YouTube. You should watch it. It's really interesting. It really is quite monumental. An address specifically to the attendees of this conference, Bitcoin 2021. I've seen like state governors speak at Ethereum conferences. I have yet to see the president of a country speak, but maybe it happened and I missed it, or maybe it will happen sometime soon. But yeah, so like what's going on, right? And so Bukele, in this video, made quite a startling announcement that, as I hinted at a moment ago, he had been working with Jack Mallers and with the Strike team and a few other advisors to create legislation to make Bitcoin legal tender in El Salvador. Again, watch this talk. It's on YouTube. It's pretty interesting. I thought this was a good image. I mean, this was a very, very, very emotional talk. I was moved by it. I also highly suggest just watch the whole video of this whole talk. This gentleman, Jack Mallers, he's a good public speaker and makes a very convincing case for why this work is so important. He was quite emotional on stage. He gave an interview on the What Bitcoin Did podcast, great podcast, check it out, where he describes kind of the craziness leading up to this announcement, this presentation, right? It was actually all secret, not only from like the Bitcoin community, but from the whole world, even from the people in El Salvador. And so maybe that's not such a good thing. And so there was just kind of a lot of pressure leading up to this moment and anyway, it was all kind of released in this talk. So again, watch the talk, really, really interesting. So sure enough, a few days later, June 9th, President Bukele sent this Bitcoin law to Congress in El Salvador. And he also posted the full text of the proposed legislation in Spanish and in English. As you can see, it's very short. It's a page and a half. We will go through it in detail in a moment, so don't worry about reading it now. And again, this was June 9th, so a few hours later, is it down here? Yeah, on June 9th, it was approved by a supermajority of the Salvadorian Congress, 62 out of 84 votes. Now, what he doesn't mention here is that his party controls a supermajority. They have something like 60 of those votes were his own party, and so that's why this happened so quickly. And again, I'm sort of fast-forwarding a little bit here by saying that it's not entirely clear that kind of the full democratic process played out here correctly, and we'll analyze that in more detail later, but this is just an overview. And that led to headlines like this one. Pretty interesting stuff. So again, this is Jack Mallers wearing his El Salvador football jersey, and this is a local newspaper announcing that Bitcoin is now a legal tender in El Salvador. Pretty crazy stuff. You'll notice, by the way, that this is denominated in US dollars because, as we're about to talk about, El Salvador is a dollarized economy. Of course, crypto Twitter exploded. Again, don't worry about reading these in detail. We're going to go through some of these a little bit later. A lot of armchair analysis, criticism, et cetera. And basically, the direction I'm going in this talk is I kind of want to walk you guys through my own process of like understanding what the heck is going on, what does this all mean. So let's kind of zoom out a little bit. So we'll talk a little bit about the context of El Salvador, kind of some of the history and socio-political economic context in El Salvador. We'll talk about Lightning Network, how that fits in, how that's kind of an enabling technology here, this Bitcoin Beach project, which I mentioned a moment ago, and then Zap and Strike. So Strike originally started as a Lightning Network wallet called Zap. We'll talk about the Bitcoin law, take a closer look at it. We'll look at, in detail, kind of how remittances work in Strike, how we kind of follow the money and kind of analyze how this all looks under the hood, which I think is a very interesting piece. And then we'll kind of look at both cases. We'll kind of look at the happy path and the unhappy path and discuss ways in which I think this could end very well and ways in which it could end very, very poorly for the Bitcoin community, the crypto community, for the people of El Salvador, and kind of for the world at large. I'll briefly share with you guys kind of where I'm at after looking at both of those paths. And then I think where kind of Ethereum fits in and DeFi and some of the stuff we're working on here, we'll talk a little bit about how we can use some of the tools and ideas in this ecosystem to potentially improve the model that's being used here. So there's going to be a lot of memes in this talk. I hope you guys are fans of memes. So I think this is the parliament in El Salvador, or the Congress, I should say. As I said a moment ago, I had heard of El Salvador prior to experiencing, seeing this talk and understanding what's going on. But I didn't know where it was. I probably could not have found it on a map, even though it's close to home for me. So El Salvador is a country of about 7 million people. It's a very small country geographically. It's kind of in the middle of Latin America. To the extent that I had heard of El Salvador and kind of the times it makes the news and headlines, it tends to be stories like this, right? So it's a country that has struggled quite a bit with gangs, in particular with gang violence, with corruption, with inequality and poverty. It's a very, very poor country. It also has issues with natural disasters and corruption. So I think all three of the most recent 3 presidents prior to Bukele were all convicted of corruption and thrown in jail or house arrest. So that gives you a sense of kind of the level of corruption we're talking about here. Interestingly, El Salvador receives around 20% of its GDP in the form of remittances. So here we're connecting back to the remittances topic. I don't know this service. I've never used it Remitly, but this is kind of one of the crypto, non-Bitcoin or Lightning related services you might use to send money, typically US dollars, to Auntie Rosa here in El Salvador. We'll meet her again a few slides later. 20%, think about that for a second. 20% of GDP. I mean, that's billions of dollars of GDP. El Salvador, has some, I think it's roughly equal to the amount of exports. So they do export certain types of goods, things like t-shirts, and coffee has been a big trade staple for them. But again, 20% is a huge number in terms of remittances. It's not the highest in the world. Some countries are higher. But if you realize that every single one of these payments, which are typically sent by El Salvadorians working abroad in places like the United States, back to family in El Salvador, every one of those payments, they're paying 10, 20, 30% fees to Western Union and other remittance service providers. So what percentage, you could do the math quickly, right? What percentage of the annual GDP of this country is going to big corporations? It's a large number. And so it, kind of explains why El Salvador is a prime place where we might want to try introducing better options for remittances. Another reason is the economy of El Salvador. So they used to have their own currency called the colón, named after Christopher Columbus. Proud history, right? 120 years plus of sovereign control over their currency, their monetary policy, until 2001, when the country faced an economic crisis and decided to dollarize. Very, very few El Salvadorians have access to bank accounts, or I should say, just basically they are unbanked, even if they have access. So more than 70% of the adult population is unbanked. And while many of them lack bank accounts, they do all have cell phones, actually relatively modern phones. So again, if you do the math, maybe there's some sort of technological solution that could be better for them than going to a Western Union location, receiving 80% of what was sent, and then having to hand over another 25% of that to the gang member standing outside the Western Union, which is kind of how things work in El Salvador. Again, I mentioned corruption. So corruption is a huge issue. Yeah, of the last 4 presidents, sorry, this is the actual figure. Of the last 4 presidents, 3 of them were convicted of corruption. So a lot of corruption. And so now we have this gentleman, Nayib Bukele, who, of course, has laser eyes. This has become a theme. A lot of the leaders in Latin American countries have begun putting these up. This is from his Twitter profile. So this is not like something someone else did. He posted this himself. He was the mayor of San Salvador, the capital, was elected president 2 years ago in 2019. He's very young, he's 39, so he's been called the world's first millennial president. He is quite populist, and he has certain authoritarian tendencies, which we will discuss in more detail soon. It's been said that he governs his country on Twitter. That's what this says in Spanish, which I think is pretty interesting. You'll see some of his tweets as well. He's very active on Twitter. And you know, I had heard of him, right? And the reason I'd heard of him is because of articles like this. So there have been a lot of articles about, quote unquote, El Salvador's slide to authoritarianism. He has two brothers who will meet shortly who are among his closest advisors, but of course they're not elected officials. So that smells a little bit like nepotism to me. However, in spite of all of this, or maybe because of it, he has extraordinarily high approval ratings. Okay, he won in the election with greater than 90% of the vote, and it was deemed to be a free and fair election. So this is like a real legitimate election. He is legitimately a populist leader. He still has massive support among his people, very high approval rating. And so as I was beginning to kind of dig into this and look into what's going on, I couldn't help but feel a little bit of cognitive dissonance here, right? On the one hand, we have this guy who's violating all these international norms, who's violating the sanctity of democracy, and I'll show you some specific examples of what he did later. And so, you know, those of us who appreciate democracy, I certainly do. I think I hesitate to celebrate, you know, his presidency or his popularity. On the other hand, I'm not El Salvadorian, right? So it doesn't matter what I think. What really matters is what the people of El Salvador choose, you know, who they choose to be their leader. And if 90% of them support this guy, then who am I to judge him? So again, just some tension here, some cognitive dissonance, and we'll come back to this. This is one of the themes, I think, of this talk. So let's change gears a little bit now and look at some of the technology that was sort of evolving in parallel. So this thing called Bitcoin exists. I think everyone here knows what Bitcoin is. On top of Bitcoin, this technology called the Lightning Network has been developed. Again, I think probably everyone here is familiar with Lightning, but as a very brief overview, it's been under development for about 5, maybe 6 years. It is a layer 2 payment solution for Bitcoin. And the way it works is it allows two parties to open a payment channel. So in Ethereum land, we usually call these things state channels between each other and lock a certain amount of funds into that channel. And the act of opening the channel does require a single mainnet on-chain transaction. But once the channel is open, funds can flow basically instantaneously and basically for free back and forth between those two parties. That sounds sort of useful. It doesn't sound incredibly useful until you understand that you can do this routing, right? And so there are projects in the Ethereum space like trust lines, circles that are kind of using similar ideas, right? But the idea is if I have a channel to Alice and I want to send funds to Bob and I don't have a channel to Bob, then I can route my payment through Alice, and Alice will collect a very, very, very small fee denominated in Satoshis. So like orders of magnitude less than even like a single US cent for that transaction. So it's exciting that this exists. It's developed quite rapidly. There are a number of implementations. But of course, you know, Lightning is still a relatively immature protocol. It has faced a number of criticisms about, for example, it's a bit capital inefficient, right? All those funds have to be locked into those channels in order for it to work. It's not easy to run a node, and the revenue you receive for running a node is very, very low right now. Also, people have said that it's kind of centralizing, right? Because you're going to have a small number of these hubs that become very, very well connected, and you know, we all like decentralization, not centralization. However, you know, again, it continues to emerge, and there's really interesting active research on Lightning. It's actually one of the areas of Bitcoin that has the most active research going on. And so just as one recent example, there's some really solid research recently that's emerged around better routing protocols. And it is usable. I can attest to this. I've done it. I used it quite a bit in Miami for the first time. There are wallets. There's one called Wallet of Satoshi. There is another one called Moon, M-U-U-N, from a team of developers in Argentina. So that's what this is. It's very, very easy. You can buy Bitcoin on Coinbase or Cash App or something like that. You can send it into the Lightning Network, into your wallet in an app like this. And again, the transactions are instant. And being able to kind of send Bitcoin instantly and for free is pretty exciting to those of us who are used to high fees and slow confirmation times. And yeah, quite an ecosystem of apps and services have emerged on Lightning recently. So how does this all kind of connect? Let's go back to El Salvador again. So there was a project launched in 2019 in El Salvador called Bitcoin Beach. It's quite an interesting story, as always in these cases. There was an anonymous donor who donated quite a bit of money. Apparently, this individual found, this typical story, found an old Bitcoin wallet where they had bought Bitcoin years and years and years back when it was worth nothing, and obviously it gone up quite a bit in value, and they wanted to contribute back to this local ecosystem. This individual who had spent quite a bit of time here in El Salvador, and launched this project called Bitcoin Beach in a small town called El Zonte, which is a village. It's a fishing village with only 3,000 residents. And the idea was to build a self-contained local economy where everything is denominated in Bitcoin. And you can transact entirely in Bitcoin. You can be paid in Bitcoin. You can buy a cup of coffee in Bitcoin. You can go to the grocery store and pay in Bitcoin. And one of the things they did as part of this project was giving grants of about $45 each to 500 families, which 4,000 people, 500 families, that's basically everybody in El Zonte, which I think is pretty interesting. It's kind of an airdrop, I guess you could call it. They developed their own Bitcoin Beach wallet application as well, which I think also supports Lightning. And they did a lot of heavy lifting, right? They invested a lot of time during the pandemic, not an easy time or place to be doing this, going around training people in this community, locals, to use the wallet software, understanding the benefits of Bitcoin. This gentleman, his name is Jorge Valenzuela, is one of the leaders of this project. There's a lot of really, inspirational photos like this on the Bitcoin Beach website, and there's some good articles about it, so check it out. I have not been there, but I met someone in this room a few minutes ago who's going to El Salvador soon. I'm also hoping to go soon. If you're interested in coming along, you should. I'm sure they'll welcome Ethereans and various other denizens of our ecosystems. And then, in parallel to all of this, we have, going back to Jack Mallers and his projects, right? So he is based in Chicago, that's why it says Chicago. He developed a project called Zap, Lightning, Strike. I actually didn't get this at first, but there's a theme here. And Zap is pretty cool, right? So they have both a kind of desktop and mobile version of the application. It's open source, which is nice. It's not only a Lightning wallet, it also lets you manage your channels. If you want to open a bunch of Lightning channels, fund them. Zap was developed into a for-profit company called Strike. I don't know, but I'm assuming that it probably forms the basis of the technology as well. Strike, unfortunately, is not open source, so I can't confirm this. And so Strike, unlike Zap, is a custodial wallet. So this looks and feels a lot like Venmo or Cash App if you've used those sorts of applications before. The UX is great. It's very, very smooth. You can link it to your bank account. You can move US dollars into Strike over EFT, funds transfer, instantly, basically, for free. And Strike announced earlier this year that they're sort of growing very rapidly. They're going to, quote, launch in over 200 countries. I don't know how many countries they're actually live in right now. And, quote, onboard 1 million Bittrex users and roll out payment cards in the United States and here in Europe. I don't think that's happened yet, but that's what they're planning to do. And as part of this, Mallers and some of his team went down to El Salvador and Bitcoin Beach. So I know I'm jumping around a lot, but hopefully you could see the threads here are kind of connecting. We have the Strike team, we have Lightning, we have El Salvador, Bitcoin Beach. And this was earlier this year. They began onboarding people onto the Strike app. And if he did, as I imagine he did, the sort of analysis that we did a moment ago, you kind of look at El Salvador. It's not terribly far if you're coming from North America. 70% unbanked, huge portion of remittances. It kind of makes sense if you're developing this sort of technology to target a place like that. And again, the Bitcoin Beach project had already begun to educate people. So Strike launched in El Salvador. And very quickly, this is quite remarkable, this is where the story starts to get very interesting. It shot to the #1 app in the App Store in El Salvador. And actually, I mean, this starts in kind of mid to late April, but I think this goes out quite far. So for a month or possibly months, it was the #1 app. It was the #1 of all apps, and it was also the #1 finance app. I think this is finance apps in the App Store or App Stores in El Salvador. So it began to get a lot of attention. And you can see it stayed roughly in the top 10 since then. They said that they were seeing 15,000 to 20,000 signups a day. That doesn't sound like a huge, huge number if you're used to kind of Silicon Valley metrics. But again, put things in perspective. El Salvador is a relatively small country, 7 million people, right? This is very, very significant uptake. The next thing that happened is, and again, the story starts to get very interesting here. So Mallers was contacted on Twitter by the brother of the president. So I mentioned earlier that the president's brothers, Yusuf and Ibrahim, are two of his closest advisors. What I'm recounting now it comes from an interview that Mallers gave on, again, this What Bitcoin Did podcast, so you should hear it in his own words, but I'm just telling the story. He was out at dinner, in El Salvador with a friend and got a DM on Twitter and opened it and basically said, hi, I think it was Yusuf. I'm Yusuf Bukele. I'm the brother of the president. We're excited about your app. We're excited about what you're doing. Do you want to come meet us? And he was terrified. I would be terrified too. And kind of said, wait a second, I need to get my ducks in a row. Maybe I need a lawyer. I need to make sure I'm not walking into some sort of a scam or a trap or something. And kind of said, give me a few days. And apparently they said, meet us tomorrow, or you're going to lose the chance. And what they did was they sent him a set of GPS coordinates, and that's it. Right? So again, remember, this is a country that has a big problem with violent crime. I think until recently, El Salvador had the highest murder rate per capita in basically the whole world. Pretty scary shit. But he went, and I think the way he tells the story, he told a friend where he's going to be and said, if you don't hear from me in a few hours, call the police, call the embassy. So he shows up, and there's like a row of guards holding AK-47, holding rifles, which apparently is how business gets done in El Salvador. Long story short, he sat down with these gentlemen, sat down eventually with Bukele, the president himself. And I'll circle back. I'll pick up this thread again in a moment. And so basically, yeah, this is where things connect, right? So going back to Miami, that's how this announcement came to happen. Basically that Mallers collaborated with Nayib Bukele and the government in secret to develop this law, this Bitcoin legislation. It was kept secret from basically everybody until it was announced at this conference about a month ago. And later, so this is a screen grab of a talk that Bukele gave a couple weeks after that to the people of El Salvador. And so here he's kind of explaining a bit more about the Bitcoin law and how it happened. So this $30 figure, so what this means is that the government itself is rolling out its own wallet software and incentivizing all the El Salvadorians who sign up to use it with $30. For the cypherpunks in the room, you should be shitting yourselves right now. This is pretty bad, right? Like, there were talks earlier today, a lot of good talks about privacy. I'm not sure that we want, the governments can already see most of what we're doing on chain, thanks to the wonderful folks at, I won't name any, but they knew who they are. The project's doing analysis of blockchain transactions. They're all public. Twitter for your bank account, as it's been called. So now, why don't we give our keys to the government too and have a government wallet? Anyway, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me actually go through a little bit about what he said, because I think this is very interesting. So Bukele explained that this was in consultation with Strike and with Jack Mallers. Sorry. He explained that Bitcoin was going to be declared legal tender in El Salvador. Now this is interesting, right? What does legal tender actually mean? I had to do some homework on this. This is kind of part of this that I didn't really understand. So here's the official definition from Wikipedia, very official. Anything which, when offered or tendered in payment of a debt, extinguishes the debt. There's a lot of nuances here. I don't want to go too deep into this, but the main part I want to highlight is the word debt, right? So we say in the United States that the US dollar is legal tender. I believe it actually says legal tender for all debts, public and private. But the key word is debt. In particular, it does not need to be accepted for spot transactions. So if I walk into a shop and I want to buy a sandwich, the shopkeeper is not obligated to take US dollars, right? That's how it's interpreted in most of the world. That's not the case here. So all merchants who are capable of accepting Bitcoin, not defined what that means, are forced to accept Bitcoin, not just for debt payment, not just for the government accepting for taxes, but like actually for day-to-day transactions. What does it mean to be capable? Do they need a smartphone? Do they need to be savvy, tech savvy? Do they need a bank account? I mentioned the government wallet already. They're not forced to use the government wallet. This is still interoperable on the Lightning Network. So you could use Strike or another wallet. And then I think the most interesting part of the proposal is that the government is opening a central bank administered trust fund. And so what this does is for merchants who are forced to accept Bitcoin but don't want to hold it because of volatility, the government trust fund will act as a counterparty and instantly convert that Bitcoin back to dollars at a spot rate so that the vendors are not forced to hold Bitcoin or be exposed to its volatility. And so the way he phrased this is, quote, you have to accept Bitcoin, but you don't have to hold it. They also decided that we, non-El Salvadorians, we foreigners, can receive permanent residency for investing the sum of 3 Bitcoin in El Salvador, denominated in Bitcoin. Investing, you're not buying residency, you're investing. Let's see. Okay, this is more about the trust fund. So the trust fund is going to hold 150 million US dollars. You can ask yourselves whether that's a lot or a little. Let me kind of quickly go through some of the interesting bits. We have some time here, which is good. We have a whole hour. So I'm not reading all of them, but so Article 2, the exchange rate between Bitcoin and the dollar will be freely established by the market. Unclear what the oracle is here, where the price is taken from. Prices for any transaction may be expressed in Bitcoin. Okay, so it's a medium of exchange, a unit of account. Tax contributions can be paid in Bitcoin. You're not forced to pay your taxes in Bitcoin, but you can. That's kind of cool. Exchanges in Bitcoin will not be subject to capital gains tax, just like any legal tender. So this is actually fairly significant. I know that crypto is not, doesn't face capital gains taxes everywhere. It happens to be in the United States, but this is very attractive for kind of investment. What else? Every economic agent must accept Bitcoin as payment when offered to him by whoever acquires a good or service. So again, this is kind of forcing people to accept Bitcoin. The state shall provide alternatives that allow the user to carry out transactions in Bitcoin and have automatic and instant convertibility from Bitcoin to US dollar if they wish. We talked about that. The executive branch will create the necessary institutional structure to apply this law. What structure? Not clear at all. I'm used to bills that get passed in the United States Congress being 1,000 pages long. That's probably a little bit too long, but I'm not sure a page and a half is enough when so much is at stake. So a lot of details left out. All obligations in money expressed in US dollars existing before the effective date of this law may be paid in Bitcoin. So anyone who owes anyone any amount of money denominated in dollars in El Salvador, which is basically all debt, may be paid in Bitcoin. So this is basically the legal tender clause. And then finally, laying out that the Bandesal, which is the central bank, will set up the trust fund to guarantee the instantaneous convertibility. So I was a little confused by this, by reading, there's very scant information available on the Strike website. The code is not open source, as I said. So I kind of thought it would be interesting to do a sort of follow the money exercise, where we actually follow the path of a transaction and see what that would look like from start to finish. So we're going to do that. Unfortunately, I don't have animation here, so I think this should work here. Give me 1 sec to find the slide. Oh, sorry. Yes, I had it here. Perfect. So let's say I have dollars in a US bank account. I can, as I said before, set up a Strike account and transfer those dollars into my Strike account, right? So in concrete terms, what's happening here is the existing financial rails, the EFT, electronic funds transfer network, is moving those funds to Strike. Strike can make those funds available to me instantly the way that Venmo and Coinbase do, but in reality, this transaction is going to take a couple days at least to settle because it's not crypto. Then Strike is going to Okay, so what happens next, right? So if I want to send funds in Strike to my friend down the road, that's not interesting, right? Because my friend down the road also has a US bank account, also has a US Strike account. That's just updating a database row internally at Strike. It's not interesting. It's the same thing that Coinbase or Binance does if funds are transferred internally, right? But so the interesting case, of course, is the remittances case. So let's say that I want to send funds to Auntie Rosa, we met her before, in El Salvador. So the first thing that Strike is going to do is it's going to convert my dollars to Bitcoin. You can't see any of this, can you? Sorry. One sec. OK, now you can see it. Sorry about that. So this symbol is like the exchange symbol. And again, we don't have a lot of clarity on which exchange is being used or what kind of fees are being paid. But we know that fees are being paid for every sort of transfer between currencies. And we don't know how favorable the exchange rate is, right? So value is being lost. Then that Bitcoin is going to be sent to a Strike wallet, like a hot wallet in El Salvador. This part's a little confusing, right? You might kind of think, oh, Bitcoin is global, it's international. Like, why does it need to be, why does Strike need to maintain kind of different wallets? Well, this is because it's a centralized provider, and they legally need to custody that Bitcoin in in El Salvador for whatever that's worth. And then that Bitcoin is going to be moved to our favorite coin, Tether. Also very interesting. So Mallers has explained that this step is necessary, and it's happening because Strike is not legally authorized to hold US dollar balances because it's not a bank. It doesn't sort of have that regulatory approval in El Salvador. However, they claim that they're also phasing out Tether and that they have sort of deals with banks. And maybe this part will go away. And then, OK, so then this Tether is going to land in Auntie Rosa's account. Okay, and so she's going to get a push notification in Strike. She's going to open the app, and she's going to see that she has a balance in quote-unquote dollars. They're not really dollars. They're Tether. And when she wants to spend that money, the Tether is going to be turned back into Bitcoin. And so if she wants to, so there's a couple things she could do, right? She could withdraw the funds in cold, hard cash, in actual US dollars. And so the way she would do that is she would turn it back into Bitcoin in the Strike app, send it to a Bitcoin ATM, and then withdraw dollars from the ATM. That's one thing that she could do. Another thing that she could do is send it to a merchant or sort of purchase something, right, in kind. And so in this case, the Bitcoin, so again, Strike would convert the Tether back to Bitcoin, send it to the merchant who would receive the Bitcoin, and then we're now talking about this, what we talked about a moment ago, the kind of trust fund and merchants who don't want to be exposed to the volatility of Bitcoin, they can access the central bank as a counterparty and basically deposit that Bitcoin with the central bank, with the trust fund, and receive dollars on account. Yeah, and they receive the dollars back. So there's a lot of interesting things about this flow here. Again, a lot of this is my own speculation because details are not available, so I'm piecing together as best I can. But the main point is like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? There's 4 exchanges, right? There's sort of Bitcoin moving back and forth between Tether and moving back and forth between dollars. We want, like our goal is to do better than the existing remittances rails. Again, people are paying at least 10% for small balance transfers, right? 10%, 20%, 30%. I don't think this would cost that much. It probably is significantly better, but by how much? It's hard to know without understanding the kind of market dynamics here a little better. Let me switch back. I don't speak French. Which one is the current slide? Diapositive actuelle or du début? Actuelle, this one, right? Oh, thank goodness. OK. OK, where are we? Oh, the animation is working here. I'll be darned. Sorry about that. That was a waste of time. OK, cool. So moving now into the kind of latter portion of the talk, let's talk about the happy path, right? So what happens, what needs to happen for this to work well? What's the best case scenario? So let's give Bukele the benefit of the doubt. Let's assume that he is actually a good actor and really genuinely has the interests of the people of El Salvador and maybe the Bitcoin community in mind. He and his cronies are not going to try to do a power grab or make a quick buck here and exit scam. They're in this for the long term. They're going to weather the storm and the next crypto winter, right? They're not going to be tempted by the pile of Bitcoin that they're hodling in their trust fund. Maybe Bitcoin volatility will go down over time because volatility is an issue for the trust fund. Maybe the scheme, in particular kind of the 3 Bitcoin investment scheme, attracts the right types of people, the right types of capital and investment, and crypto enthusiasts, and all of us flock to El Salvador. And El Salvador benefits from plugging into this global permissionless innovation and financial network, right? I think that's the best case scenario. I think it's possible. I think we also have to assume that Tether is not a scam, or at least, it maintains value long enough for them to swap it out. And there's also the technical risk of Lightning, so we have to also, in this positive scenario, imagine that Lightning continues to develop well and continues to evolve and overcome some of the technical barriers that it's facing. So look, it's a lot of things that need to go right, but it could happen, right? And this could end well. I think that there's more to say about the downside risk here, so let's kind of look into this. And I think that this quote sums it up pretty well. So this is from a famous economist, Hyman Minsky. Everyone can create money. The problem is to get it accepted. So we all know by now in this community how easy it is to create money, right? Spin up an ERC-20 contract, boom. But at the end of the day, as I think we all are also aware, money is a story, right? And it's a shared story, and it only works if enough people continue to believe in that story and share that story. And so what kind of pieces need to fall into place for this story to work in the case of El Salvador? So I mentioned some of Bukele's kind of autocratic tendencies before. So a couple things, interesting things he decided to do. He sent soldiers, these are soldiers, into the Legislative Assembly to encourage the passage of a bill and allegedly to overthrow the Legislative Assembly of El Salvador. Not super democratic. He, after his party won a supermajority early this year in the legislative elections, there were a lot of investigations ongoing into him and his party by the Attorney General. So he fired the Attorney General because the Attorney General was appointed by Congress, and he now has a supermajority in Congress. And he fired 5 of the Supreme Court justices too, because why not? You can do that when you control all of the state apparatuses, which he now does. He chose to keep the Bitcoin law secret from everybody. It was passed by a rubber stamp parliament with almost no consultation. As you saw from the tweets I showed you a moment ago, it was passed in just a few hours, right? And the law that went into effect in 2001 for dollarization, that took 2 or 3 days. And at the time, that was criticized for being way too fast, and it was a very monumental decision, and there wasn't enough debate. So how about something that takes 5 or 6 hours, right? It was passed just after midnight local time. Nobody had seen the law except the president and maybe the minister of the economy before it was proposed at 8 p.m. So that's about 4 hours of debate. And he didn't tell the people, he didn't even tell the press, the local press, that this was happening. And so the press was scrambling to translate stories coming to them off of the international press in English to understand what was going on in their own country. Again, he's kind of governing through Twitter. So I have a few kind of hot takes here from Twitter that I think did a great job of breaking down some of what's going on. I know we're getting a little short on time and it's a bit late, so I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, but I can share the slides and the links and everything. But what this individual, Luis, is pointing out is that it's quite interesting, actually. The Bukele regime has been, this is the populist handbook, right? Is you kind of spend a lot of money and make people happy, make friends by spending a lot of money. And he did this in the beginning of his presidency, which started in 2019. And then eventually Congress, again, before he had the supermajority, kind of put their foot down and said, okay, no more spending. They can't print money because it's dollarized, but no more spending money. no more raising taxes, et cetera. And so the case that this gentleman is making here is that Bitcoin is kind of a backdoor way for him to get more value flowing into the economy and then in turn kind of spend that money locally and make people very, very happy as a result. I wish I could read this whole tweet thread to you. It's quite long. It's really, really good, but I'm going to keep moving. I like this one a lot. When tech bros meet presidential bros, when techno-solutionism meets kleptocracy and tech washing meets greenwashing, for the people, empty promises as usual and circumvention of democratic mechanisms. We saw a moment ago how democratic mechanisms are being circumvented here for sure. We saw the tech bros and the presidential bros, literally, right, unelected officials who are sort of acting as governors. That's a little scary. This emerged very recently. This came out 2 or 3 days ago in this newspaper called El Faro, talking about how there has been a plan for some time on the part of the Bukele administration and his brothers to launch a colon dollar stablecoin. So maybe this is actually a CBDC scheme in disguise. Like, he's been, banging the Bitcoin drum a lot, but like, is the idea here to actually do Bitcoin, or is it actually to replace Tether with some kind of like government-backed stablecoin? We don't know. And this article included some video recordings and screen grabs of some of these private conversations. Quite a lot was leaked in this article, so I haven't even had time to go through all of this. Then there's the infrastructure question as well, right? So remember, the bill, now a law, said something about how the government is responsible for putting this infrastructure in place. The law goes into effect on September 7th, if I remember correctly. It's very aggressive time frame, just 3 months after the bill was passed. Only 45% of Salvadorians have internet access, and only 10% in rural areas. This is supposed to be rural El Salvador. I don't know if it's actually rural El Salvador. OK, that's great. How do you use Bitcoin without internet? There's a lot of work to do. So the Strike app doesn't work terribly well on a lot of the old phones that are in use in El Salvador and other parts of the developing world. And then remember my example of Auntie Rosa cashing out her Strike balance using Bitcoin ATMs. How many Bitcoin ATMs are there in El Salvador? Anyone want to hazard a guess? As of a few days ago, there were 2. This is Bitcoin Beach, and there are none, you'll note, in backwaters like the capital, San Salvador. I actually think that there are a couple that have popped up since this screen grab was taken, so full transparency, but very, very, very small number. So that's challenging. Who's going to do this infrastructural work? Is the government going to do it? Another great quote. El Salvador could become a haven, not just for honest Bitcoin investors, but for money launderers. And instead of just meeting merchants' legitimate requests to convert modest amounts of Bitcoin into dollars, Bandesal, the central bank, could find itself laundering large bags of dirty Bitcoins. If they, again, promise to act as a counterparty and instantly convert Bitcoin into dollars for many merchants in El Salvador, how do they discriminate, right? How do they prevent money launderers from taking advantage of the system? That's a very thorny, complex question, and we don't have any answers to this yet. So a lot of very smart analysts are saying this is going to become, it's going to attract a lot of money laundering. There's this irony as well, right? Bitcoin is about freedom, right? People proudly wear these shirts at the Bitcoin conference saying Bitcoin is freedom, and yet people are being coerced into using it. That's what the law said. If you're capable of doing it, you're required to accept it, even if you don't want to. In a recent survey, 92% of people in El Salvador said that they did not agree with the rule making acceptance of Bitcoin mandatory, and 93% said they did not want to have their salaries paid in Bitcoin. 85% said that they were not interested in receiving even remittances in Bitcoin. So if the people don't want it, that's going to be a challenge. It's going to be an uphill battle. So there's been commentary about Tether. As we all know, Tether is unclear kind of what's backing it. And so to call a Tether balance in Strike your mobile bank account or US dollars or synthetic digital dollars is a little bit disingenuous on the part of Strike. And in particular, you can't withdraw USDT. You can't withdraw Tether as physical dollars from an ATM. It has to go back to Bitcoin and back to dollars, and so there's more hops and more fees being paid there. Again, Strike claims that they're removing Tether from the equation. That would be nice. Yeah, another hot take suggesting that rather than setting up a new financial system, that kind of robbery is hard, so let's convert everything to some weird coin and take all the US dollars out and run. And so this is suggesting this is why they're going to issue a stablecoin, so that might happen. This has been done, this is, quote, been done by corrupt governments all over the world, so this is kind of not a new move. There's a lot of risk with the trust fund, right? It depends a lot upon balance of payments. If you have a scenario where there's a lot of Bitcoin flowing into the country and not flowing out, and then on top of that, so the trust fund is paying out dollars all the time, and on top of that, the price of Bitcoin falls, which, as we know, it tends to do. It could very quickly run out of money. And then what happens? Do they top it up with more money? You know, the whole government reserves is on the order of a couple $2 billion. They don't have unlimited funds to do this. So it's sort of an economic recipe for disaster. Then there's the kind of risks and challenges associated with Lightning itself. So again, it's a little bit disingenuous for Strike to say that there are no intermediaries in the equation, because actually they're running their own Lightning nodes, their own Lightning channels, and it's not open. You can't actually open a channel and talk to them, and they'll explain, you know, infrastructurally it's very difficult to do that right now. Lightning partners charge fees for channeling payments, so basically saying no fees, no intermediaries is not completely true. I kind of understand this as an engineer. I get that sometimes you need to spin up your own infrastructure. Hopefully, again, Lightning will develop quickly, and that won't be necessary in the future. Again, I wish I had time to go through this thread. This is a really great Reddit thread that breaks down, and it's actually from 3 years ago, but it still illustrates a lot of the kind of technical challenges facing Lightning. We talked about the centralization factor, kind of capital inefficiency. A big issue is like routing transactions. The protocol doesn't have any way to make the overall topology of the network discoverable. So every wallet is responsible on its own for discovering the entire network, which often requires things like gossiping all the transactions to the entire network. So everyone knows which channels are open and who's listening where, which is a privacy issue. So there's a lot of technical challenges associated with Lightning still. Read this thread if you're interested in more. Going back to Tether, right? So this is the data that was shared recently on what's backing Tether. This is an interpretation of that data that I pulled off of Twitter. I think it's interesting. So, you know, they claim that about half of it is in this quote-unquote commercial paper, and this analyst is saying that probably means crypto-backed loans, and a lot of this is circular. It's like, is Tether backed by crypto, and crypto's backed by Tether, so it's a bit of a house of cards scenario. You know, Tether, yeah, you can see here, 20 billion with a B, right? $20 billion worth of commercial paper, which is short-term debt issued by companies. There was a lot of reaction in the financial markets when this data was released. You know, folks like JP Morgan, who are very active in the commercial paper market, looked at this and said, we've never heard of Tether before. We've never seen them as a counterparty. Something kind of fishy is going on. Maybe, I don't know. So a lot of criticism of the Tether component here. So to bring it home, you know, I think this is kind of my take, right? I think that Bukele is facing a very interesting choice, right? So you can get the nature of the choice from the meme here. I think that we're all in alignment that the kind of end goal here is, I mean, obviously kind of economic sovereignty, financial stability for the people of El Salvador and other developing countries. Of course, democracy, we don't want to sacrifice democracy in the process. So it's very easy to kind of criticize what's going on in El Salvador from where we stand, from where we sit, you know, in you know, relatively democratic countries with, I have to say relative a lot, given the state of the world, but relatively functional democracies, you know, relatively functional financial markets relative to a place like El Salvador. And we are not dealing with the levels of corruption and crime and poverty, violence, inequality that they are in El Salvador. And I actually, you know, think that sometimes it takes a very strong leader to get things done and to get things unstuck and make changes that need to happen. At the same time, I think that we, as a community, the kind of broader crypto community, should not be endlessly patient, right? We should be very, very clear about our values, about what we stand for, that we care about democracy. We should sort of give Bukele, give El Salvador, give Strike the benefit of the doubt, and tentatively support this work. and trust, but verify, right? So we need to see progress on important KPIs like accountability, transparency, et cetera. And there hasn't been a lot of that in this process so far. Hopefully that's clear from the presentation. I think that it was only a matter of time before this quote-unquote crypto land grab happened on the part of small nation states. Folks like Balaji Srinivasan have written a lot about this, about the role that Bitcoin can play on the kind of geopolitical stage, especially for small marginalized countries. So it's not surprising, I guess, that it's happening now. And yeah, I think it's interesting to ask, how do we take our values, things that we value like privacy and self-sovereignty, and like make it clear that we want to see these things play out on a global stage, right? Because it's easy for those of us in a conference like this to kind of sit in these rooms and talk with each other about these cool technologies and the toys we're building and DeFi and things like that. But like, this is real shit, okay? This is like actually happening. This is affecting millions of people in the world today. So if we're going to build a new world order, and it seems pretty clear that that's the direction we're going, we need to clearly articulate those values. And I think this is a great opportunity to do that by supporting projects like this, trust but verify, cautiously optimistic. Okay, I have 3 minutes, so I'm going to wrap up. So what sort of things could we potentially contribute to a project like this? How could we make it better? This is all being done by a centralized for-profit company, Strike. You know, lots of respect to Strike. They're doing important, groundbreaking work. But what would it look like if we wrapped a protocol around it, right? What would it look like if we cut out the middleman entirely, and we gave the users of this system a stake in the system and a say and a role in governance? That's the first Ethereum take on this that I think would be really awesome to explore, and this is kind of something I'm looking into. Number two, you've seen this before, lots of hops here. Like, I don't get, like, this whole chunk here in the middle, right? Like, Bitcoin, 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 Bitcoin. Like, can we just, like, cut this all out completely, and can we, like, truly make this really, truly instant and really, truly fee-free? I don't know. That's a hard problem, right? And there's like regulatory issues, and on-ramps and off-ramps are hard, but that's an angle that I want to take here. And finally, this is not a reference to SushiSwap. We love SushiSwap. This is a reference to rollups. Can we do better than Lightning Network, right? So we have more powerful tools in the Ethereum ecosystem. We have things like rollups that are much more capital efficient. Rather than having to kind of lock up all this capital in these like one-to-one, point-to-point channels, could we envision what this would look like in like a roll-up ecosystem? I think that'd be really, really interesting. It also removes like the routing issues that you're facing in Lightning. I have no idea what défi la mode de France is. This is just the first slide that came up when I was looking for DeFi, so I thought it was kind of appropriate. What sort of additional products and services could we offer on a platform like this if it was a protocol, if it was decentralized? I think of remittances as kind of the Trojan horse, right? So it's the way to onboard people. It's an immediate need. It's a low-hanging fruit. It's a way to get funds, crypto funds, flowing into an ecosystem like El Salvador. But from there, it's pretty clear that in addition to stablecoins, maybe we need micro-insurance policies. Maybe we need lending. We're really good at that, you may have noticed, in the Ethereum DeFi ecosystem. Can we use a less scammy stablecoin? What if we added UBI to it, right? UBI. So that's about all I've got. Thank you for listening. I'm helping spin up I'm going to call it a working group called the Crypto Dictators Watch. It's on Telegram. Hopefully I'm not blocking that QR code. Scan it, join. We're going to be doing like calls and workshops on a lot of these topics that I've been mentioning. Really excited to have more contributors. This is really important groundwork that's being laid. I'm very optimistic about the path forward. I'm skeptically optimistic about El Salvador and Strike. So let's see where it all goes. Thank you very much for listening. I'll go back to that in a sec. I'm happy to take a couple questions. I don't want to stand in between anyone and happy hour or dinner or whatever, but feel free if you have questions. Yeah. Oh, how many people have applied for the Bitcoin visa, or I guess it is a visa, yeah, permanent residency. I have no idea. I don't think it's actually launched yet because, again, this whole law goes into effect in September. So I think the number is probably 0. It's interesting, right? I mean, it's interesting that it's denominated in Bitcoin. If Bitcoin crashes, you know, can you get permanent residency for 5 figures instead of 6 figures? I mean, that would be very rare. Like, it's not rare at all that a developing country would offer an investment, like a permanent residency in exchange for investment. These schemes exist all over the world, but doing it in Bitcoin is quite interesting. Yeah. So we'll keep our eye on that. Yeah. We'll do a V2 of this talk next year. And
I joined the group.
Amazing. Welcome. Any other questions?
So if you have a currency that appreciates, like doubles, your exports are going to crash, right? So
yeah, so if your exports are denominated in a local currency and your local currency doubles relative to your trading partners, then all else being equal, it's going to become twice as expensive. So correct, your exports will drop. Yes.
Yeah. So if Bitcoin was really like accepted in Salvador, it would kill their exports. So I'm just wondering if they.
Wait, sorry, I want to make sure I understand. That's only if they're denominating their exports in Bitcoin, right?
No, that's if it becomes a currency of the land, right? Because if you are paying everything like you're paying your suppliers in Bitcoin, your exports have to be priced in Bitcoin, right? You can convert them on the fly, but they have to be naturally priced. So I'm just wondering, is this, do they even want to become really Bitcoinized, or do they just want to do the payments and just convert everything to dollars in the end? Do you have any idea?
I think this is like the key question. I think this is, I'm asking the same question, right? Is Bukele and his administration and his brothers and everyone involved in this, are they doing this because, so one good answer to this question is, as a country that's dollarized, they have given up their sovereignty over monetary policy, right? You can't issue new currency. You can't mint or burn if you're using someone else's currency. So they have some more control, or it's not really more control. No one controls the monetary policy of Bitcoin, but at least they're able to decouple from the monetary policy of the United States. So it's pretty clear that there's a net benefit there. And this goes back to, I mentioned before, people like Balaji who have talked a lot about small countries, the benefits of them adopting Bitcoin. I think that's like a big benefit, a way to kind of stand out. But yeah, like in the long term, are they going to hodl that Bitcoin in the trust fund? Are they going to somehow convert that back to US dollars? I don't know the answer to that question. Like, are they really truly long-term invested in the success of Bitcoin, or is it more just opportunistic? Good question.
I have one more. So regarding, you showed all these steps, right? And you said that many of them are because of regulations and things like that. So I'm wondering if you have such complete power, you can pass any laws. Why don't they simplify, yes, this one. Why don't they simplify the banking regulations so this would be eliminating 2 steps or something?
Yeah, I think that they're trying to do that, right? So in particular, the use of Tether rather than dollars here, that is a regulatory issue in El Salvador, and that is either being worked on or it's already been solved, supposedly. But that doesn't remove any hops here, right? That just means that I guess it does, yeah. I guess Bitcoin lands here, Bitcoin gets turned into US dollars, and that US dollars could be withdrawn maybe at a regular ATM as US dollars. So it removes kind of one step, one transfer. Also, I should mention, these Bitcoin ATMs charge very high fees as well. They charge, 3, 5, maybe 10% fees, quite high. It's not a very liquid. I guess it's just that the supply is very low, right? So they can do monopolistic pricing. Maybe if there's more Bitcoin ATMs, they'll charge lower fees. Yeah, I think that I'm a software developer, so I tend to think of things in terms of optimization and like collapsing, and like this looks like one subroutine to me, like all the kind of crypto, right? Why couldn't you just collapse this down to one? I think it would take a more sophisticated analysis to understand what regulatory changes would be needed to do that, and that's exactly what we're going to do in this working group, so you should join. Going once, going twice. All right, let's go have a drink. Thank you guys so much.